Hello, my name is AnnBarnhardt, and I'm the person who says the things that everyone else is too terrified to say. The topics now before us are the twin entitlements of Social Security and Medicare. These two entitlement programs, as they stand right now, have shackled the United States with unfunded liabilities of over $100 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars. The lowest of the low-end estimates is $61 trillion. But I can promise you that it is every bit of $100 trillion. Consider that just a few short years ago, these unfunded mandates were quoted as a mere $10 trillion liability. Given inflation and the historical proclivity for the government to underestimate the cost of everything by a factor of 10 to 15, I can say with the utmost confidence that $100 trillion is an extremely low estimate of what these programs would end up costing. Which actually brings me to my point. 60 trillion, 100 trillion, 200 trillion, 500 trillion. It doesn't matter. It's all tilting at windmills. The entire discussion is meaningless. I saw a Republican town hall discussion taped on Monday, June 13th, 2011, a week ago today, that was dispiriting beyond description. One of the participants in this town hall was Representative Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, who is widely heralded as one of the best minds in government today. He's the author of the so-called Ryan Plan to reform and save Social Security and Medicare. He's the darling of the political right in this country. That's all well and good except for one problem. The Ryan Plan is completely and utterly meaningless. It is just more dishonest political pandering. It is making promises to people that Ryan and all the others know can never, ever be kept in order to curry votes and keep us, the unwashed masses, pacified and compliant for as long as possible. Even Ron Paul has never spoken the full truth about Social Security and Medicare that I know of. But I will, so here it goes. Social Security and Medicare are criminal Ponzi schemes. The only possible way to keep these Ponzi schemes from completely collapsing and destroying the entire economy, our constitutional republic, and Western civilization by extension, as we have known it, is to rapidly sunset and eliminate them entirely. Let me say that again. The only possible way to keep these Ponzi schemes from completely collapsing and destroying the entire economy, our constitutional republic, and Western civilization as we have known it, is to rapidly sunset and eliminate them entirely. I hear people like Paul Ryan constantly talking about the need to save Social Security and save Medicare. That is all the proof you need that these people are either terminally stupid or criminal liars. These are Ponzi schemes we're talking about. In case there's anyone out there who doesn't know what a Ponzi scheme is, here's the rough definition. A Ponzi scheme is a fraudulent investment operation that pays returns to separate investors, not from any actual profit earned by the organization, but from money paid in by subsequent investors. The Ponzi scheme solicits, or in this case coerces, new investors by offering returns other investments cannot guarantee in the form of short-term returns that are either abnormally high or unusually consistent, with unusual consistency, namely a lifetime monthly annuity payment after retirement being the selling point of Social Security, coupled with the threat of having your property confiscated and or being sent to prison if you don't participate in the scheme before retirement. The perpetuation of the returns that a Ponzi scheme pays requires an ever-increasing flow of money from investors, or in this case, victims, to keep the scheme going. Most of you have probably heard of Bernie Madoff, who ran a multi-billion-dollar investment Ponzi scheme on Wall Street. He told his investors that he was investing in stocks and bonds and hedge funds, but never carried any actual positions. He used new money coming into the fund to pay off the original earlier investors, and Madoff and his family skimmed and pocketed billions of dollars, all right under the noses of the incompetent, corrupt financial industry regulators that we have in this country. Bernie Madoff will die in prison, as well he should. He's a criminal of the highest order. We all understand that with crystal clarity. But yet all politicians talk about the need to save Social Security and Medicare. That is every bit as idiotic as saying that the Madoff Ponzi scheme should have been bailed out and saved. What are you talking about? You don't save a criminal enterprise. You shut it down and clean up the mess as best you can. But people are still going to get hurt. There's nothing that can be done about that after the fact. That's why it was a criminal scheme, because it hurt people. It's the same with Social Security and Medicare. Don't talk to me about saving them. Talk to me about shutting them down as quickly as possible, which in this case will still take decades, and cleaning up the mess. Are people going to get hurt? Of course, it's a criminal scheme. But if the choice is between discomfort and pain that can be suffered through and survived, or guaranteeing the collapse and total destruction of the economy, the republic, and civilization, I choose the survivable pain and suffering. In treating Madoff as an arch criminal and Social Security and Medicare as morally licit cultural responsibilities, what you are in fact doing is applying the Stalin principle. Joseph Stalin said, "One death is a tragedy. 1 million is a statistic." This is exactly the same. The licitness of an activity is being determined solely by its scale. Stalin rationalized his mass murder by saying that once a certain numerical threshold was passed, the activity itself ceased to be constrained by any moral matrix. And so now our government and politicians are paraphrasing Stalin thusly. Madoff is a crime. Social Security and Medicare are statistics. Let's look at it from another angle. Let's say that you were diagnosed with a large malignant cancerous tumor. If you do not begin aggressive treatment, the tumor will kill you. You go to your oncologist's office to discuss the plan of treatment, and your oncologist says to you, "You have a very aggressive tumor. We must begin a course of treatment, although I will not prescribe any course of treatment that causes you any physical discomfort. Additionally, our top priority in this must be protecting the tumor and making sure that we don't do anything to harm the tumor. The tumor must survive. We must protect and save the tumor so that you and the tumor can continue to live symbiotically." What would you think about that? Would you continue to see that oncologist, or would you seek out an oncologist whose goal was to completely remove the tumor and exterminate all vestiges of the cancer from your body so that you could survive 100% cancer-free, even if that meant a potentially painful course of treatment? Anyone talking about saving Social Security and Medicare is talking about saving and defending a malignant tumor at the expense of the host, which can only result in the death of both. And that's exactly what we're looking at here, kids. I mentioned Paul Ryan earlier. Paul Ryan and all the other politicians of his ilk are the bad oncologists. Heck, let's not sugarcoat it. The politicians are Bernie Madoff. They're the ones running the scheme. They're the ones hustling for new suckers to add to the rolls. And they're the ones who are skimming trillions of dollars for themselves and their cronies. The proof of this is a quote from Ryan after a question was posed to him by an audience member in the aforementioned town hall meeting just a week ago. The audience member asked Ryan how she could be assured that there would be Medicare for her in her old age, citing the fact that she had paid into Medicare for 30 years and thus she felt entitled to a payout when she reached her retirement. Within Ryan's response was the following statement, quote, "Medicare, along with Social Security, I would argue, are the most important federal programs we have." Unquote. That's right. Paul Ryan thinks that these intrinsically immoral criminal Ponzi schemes are the two most important functions of the federal government. He goes on to say, quote, "And so what we want to do is save and strengthen the program." Unquote. According to Ryan, the perpetuation of criminal activity is the most important function and top priority of the federal government. Stalin would be proud. The woman who asked the question stated that she was 47 years old. Here is the honest answer to her question. Madam, you will not receive 1 cent of payout on either Social Security or Medicare. One of two things is going to happen long, long before you reach retirement age. Either these programs will be sunsetted and eliminated, or the United States and its government will collapse due to Social Security and Medicare and cease to exist. Either way, you're not getting a cent, and anyone who tells you that you are is lying to your face. You need to know this, understand it, and plan accordingly, because this is the reality. Here is a very, very rough description of what needs to be done, and understand that this isn't just my opinion or one option among many. This is what needs to be done to save the republic and the economy. A line needs to be drawn on the calendar whereby anyone born on or after, say, January 1st, 1960 is not going to receive any Social Security or Medicare payouts whatsoever. None. This is what I mean by sunsetting. I fully acknowledge that there are people who have planned for their retirement given the expectation of receiving Social Security and Medicare benefits and are now simply too old and do not have enough earning years left in front of them to make other arrangements. And no, I don't think those people should be thrown under the bus. Common sense applies here, as always. But if we sunset and end these programs and eliminate the entitlements for everyone born on or after January 1st, 1960, for example, tens of trillions of dollars of unfunded liabilities will instantly vanish off the balance sheet of this country. At that point, we would then know the birth date of the youngest person to receive Social Security and Medicare, which in my example would be December 31st, 1959. We would then simultaneously set an expiration date on Social Security and Medicare tax collection of no later than December 31st, 2059, when that person had their 100th birthday. I think we'd be safe at this point. Yes, that's right. You're hearing me correctly. We are going to have to keep paying these taxes in order to clean up the mess caused by this fraudulent Ponzi scheme. Someone's going to get stuck with the bill on this mess. Someone is going to have to pay into it and never get a payout. And that would be us. We don't have a choice because the ultimatum is this. Either we step up and volunteer to shoulder this burden right now, or the entire economy and republic is going to collapse. That is your choice. There is no option 3, and anyone who tells you that there's an option 3 is a liar. Social Security and Medicare can't be saved because they are fraudulent schemes and have no intrinsic integrity in and of themselves. The only choice is whether we voluntarily end them in a controlled manner, thus allowing for the survival of our economy and republic, or burying our heads in the sand and watching these fraudulent schemes reduce our culture to a smoldering rubble. And ladies and gentlemen, when I say smoldering rubble, I'm speaking literally, not metaphorically. If our economy collapses, we will see at minimum hot civil war and would stand enormous risk of being physically invaded. Now to the issue of fairness. I'm going to be very blunt here. I have almost no confidence in the average American's ability to morally rise above the issue of fairness in all this. Even if someone with any sort of real political influence were to speak the truth about this as I have, the universal cry rising up from every corner of this nation, including the so-called red states and all of the conservatives therein, would be, that's not fair. If I pay into Social Security and Medicare, then by God, I want my payout when I retire. That's not fair. Well, no kidding, it's not fair. That's why it's called a Ponzi scheme, because it's fraud. 76 years ago, our ancestors, goaded and led by criminal politicians in the spirit of Bernie Madoff, decided to criminally screw us by setting up a government Ponzi scheme. They decided that they would receive an annuity that they never had to pay into, and they called it Social Security. Then, one generation later, another generation of our ancestors, once again agitated and manipulated by criminal politicians, decided that they would receive free government health care that, again, they never had to pay into, and they called it Medicare. All Ponzi schemes have a beginning, middle, and an end. The people who get in at the beginning get a big payout with a very small investment. The people in the middle get out roughly what they put in. It's basically a wash for them. The people at the end are completely screwed and have to absorb the payout of the people who were in at the beginning and never contributed, plus all of the skimming and theft of the scheme managers, which in this case are the politicians. This is objective mathematical truth. You cannot get away from it. Fair has nothing to do with it. Marxism uses fairness as one of its major themes to agitate, destabilize, and overthrow cultures. Thieving Marxists promise that they can and will deliver perfect fairness, and the gullible, self-absorbed masses now believe them because one of the most important truisms in life is no longer being taught or even discussed. That truism is this: life isn't fair. Apparently parents stopped teaching this to their children within the last 40 or 50 years. Well, I'm teaching it to you now. Listen up and listen good. Life is not fair. This mortal coil is a valley of tears. Believe me, I know. I have been well catechized on this point. Sometimes the bad guys win. Sometimes the liar is rewarded. Sometimes good people have to pay for the mistakes and crimes of others. And sometimes they have to do it alone and in silence. And that's where we are collectively as a nation right now. Either we voluntarily choose to carry and bear an unfair burden, or there is no hope for the survival of this republic. And you know, the thing that just burns me about all of this is the fact that a nation that is mostly comprised of people who call themselves Christian is the nation that cannot voluntarily accept an unfair punishment and deprivation so that their country and their children can have a chance to live in the kind of decadent freedom and prosperity that they have enjoyed. They will watch their country go down in flames before they volunteer to accept an unfair burden, because they have been brainwashed by Marxists into believing that the government is the guarantor of fairness and the distributor of perfect justice. And that, by the way, is blasphemy. The notion of self-sacrifice is dead in this culture. And by the way, for all of you Ayn Rand fans, this is the locus at which Randian objectivism breaks down. Sometimes self-sacrifice is the only rational action. Sometimes the only way to survive is to sacrifice yourself. Sit in stillness with that one and let it roll around in your head for a while. It will be time well spent, I promise you that. But paying in and never getting a payout is unfair. You know what's unfair? This. This is unfair. This is the definition of unfair. But that's fine, right? As long as it's him. In fact, we're all about unfair punishment as long as it's him and not us. He freely chose this. He volunteered for this. Perfect justice himself allowed complete injustice to be meted out on his body and soul, and he bore it in dignified silence so that we could have a chance. And it was infinitely unfair. But now that it's time for us to voluntarily take on an unfair punishment that is merely financial, so that our descendants can have a chance at our constitutional and economic freedoms, what is this nation of Christians going to do? Probably refuse, probably demand fairness, probably selfishly demand what they're entitled to. I hope and pray that I'm wrong, but I don't think that I am. When people say the only hope this country has is turning back to Christ, they have no idea how true that is. The only way we get out of this mess intact is if we follow the example of Christ and climb up on the cross. If you are under 50 years of age, no matter what happens, you are not going to receive one dime of Social Security or Medicare. That's a fact. But we can choose whether that is voluntary or involuntary, and in that choice, we have the power to give the gift of freedom to our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. If we make the right choice and volunteer to take on an unjust financial burden that was foisted on us by criminals decades before we were even born, maybe decades from now, we will be called the greatest generation. But the one thing you won't be able to do after watching this video is claim ignorance, which is why I anticipate that it will get very little viewership. There's only one solution to this, and you now know what it is. If you choose not to do it, the blood of the greatest republic and greatest civilization in human history will be on your hands. Sunset Social Security and Medicare. Voluntarily eliminate your own entitlement and continue to bear the existing Social Security and Medicare tax burden to clean up the remaining unfunded liabilities. For the love of God, it's the only way, and you know I'm right. My name is AnnBarnhardt, and I love you enough to tell you the truth. Is there a single politician in this country of whom the same thing can be said? God bless you.